Why did women gain the vote is Britain issue 3. Here we identify which factor was the most important, as you'll see. The change in role of women is factor 1. This was the starting point for female suffrage, according to some. In 1857, being able to divorce their husbands became a female right. This was an important shift in equality, and for female suffrage began the fight. In between 1870 and 1894, women were allowed to vote in regional elections and had stand for the school board. This was another important victory for women's suffrage that they scored. If women could be trusted with the responsibility of this right, continuing until a woman had the vote equal to men would be the fight. However, even with this progress, women would still not be considered for the vote, which left them sore, but it did whet their appetite for change, so they began to fight for female suffrage even more. The suffragettes were formed in 1897 using non-violent tactics was their aim. Believing men would take them seriously if they used simple measures was their game. They sent letters to MPs, held marches and liked a good debate. Their message was simple: women not having the vote, we hate. They continued their campaign with petitions and banners trying to get more women involved. They believed the more women who joined the campaign would help get the suffrage issue solved. However, their campaign was left largely unnoticed by men. They were just filling their time socialising, according to them. The suffragettes were formed in 1903. They argued non-violent campaigning was not working. It was clear to see. Using violence would make politicians sit up and see. Until women had the vote, they would not let the issue be. The suffragettes used tactics like smashing windows, chaining themselves to railings and cutting telephone wires. With racecourses and letterboxes, they resorted to starting fires. This was important as the media kept the issue in the papers for all to see, yet again making it clear that with women's suffrage, until they had it, they would not let the issue be. In 1913, the worst was to come, the most shocking of tactics, according to some. Emily Davidson became a martyr, all in the name of a voting charter. The public were shocked to their very core. This left women wanting the vote more and more. However, according to some, their violent tactics were a step too far. This proved the theory that women could not be trusted with the vote, no matter how determined they are. The First World War was where things changed almost overnight, as women across Britain postponed their suffrage fight. As the men left our shores to fight in World War I, women replaced men making sure the country was run. Women took on jobs such as tram drivers, bus conductors and farmers, to name a few, all occupations that were considered men's job, so everything was new. Their efforts proved that they could be trusted with the responsibility of the vote, thus keeping their hope of achieving female suffrage afloat. Women were also trusted with making weapons for use on the Western Front. Proving they could be trusted with this responsibility was their most successful stunt. However, it was only women over 30 who were given the vote in 1918, which many people felt was really quite mean. This is the most important reason as to why women were given the vote in 1918. They had finally been successful with their campaign, it would seem. The example of other countries is the final one, the least important reason for female suffrage, according to some. Countries like the USA and Finland had given women the vote years before. This left Britain, who was the cradle of modern democracy, feeling quite sore. To make matters worse, New Zealand, one of Britain's colonies, had already let women have their say. Britain had to be taking the lead in democratic measures, come what may. However, France did not give women the vote until 1944. Given she was one of Britain's closest allies, this leaves this argument feeling pretty sore. Overall, we must decide if any of these facts actually dented Britain's pride. So to conclude, we must decide which one was the most important factor, the one that gave women in Britain their happily ever after. The suffragettes were important, but not the most important one. Their violence raised awareness of the campaign, but it was far too much, according to some. The least important factor was the example of other countries, according to some. Pressure from the other countries giving women the vote would not be how female suffrage was to be won. The most important factor in issue 3 was the contribution of women to the First World War. I'm sure you'll all agree. Women proved they were just as capable as men, so they should get the same voting rights as them. This is the most important reason as to why women were given the vote in 1918. They had finally been successful at their campaign, it would seem.